Teaching methods. What are they? Why do they matter? And how can you develop your own method? Today we're going to be looking at how a teenage caveman in Los Angeles, California can give us a unique picture into the learning process of our students, and why we probably shouldn't be teaching modern languages like English the exact same way that teachers taught ancient Greek and Latin over 500 years ago. This is Teaching Methods. Let's get into it. Alright, so one of the best ways to understand what teaching methods are is to first understand their relationship to some of the things we've already covered and some lessons that we're going to be covering in the future. Now, we recently looked at a number of SLA theories, including behaviorism, cognitivism, learning versus acquisition, and social views of language. And in upcoming lessons, we're going to be looking at a whole lot of techniques and procedures that you can use in your classroom. A lot of these have to do with classroom management, but things such as what activities do you do, how do you control those activities, how do you control your students, what resources do you use, do you create your own, do you use a textbook, do you find other things to use? What's the teacher's role in these activities? Is the teacher teaching or is the teacher facilitating? What does that look like? What are the students' roles? How do they learn? What is their job as a student? And in the future, we'll be talking about many more other ideas and techniques and procedures that really fall under this idea of classroom management. So what are teaching methods? Well, the way I like to look at this is that teaching methods really are just collections of all of these different kinds of techniques and procedures. There's a wide range of ideas and tools that you can use as a teacher when it comes to your activities and your resources and your role as a teacher and how you control your classroom. And many of these ideas are influenced by our view of language and language learning. These theories are not just ideas, but they really influence the types of techniques and things that we would want to use in our classroom. So for example, you may be really attached to some of the ideas from Krashen and Himes and Halliday of like, how can I create real life situations for my students inside my classroom, or how can I take care of my students' affective filter so their emotions are nice and low and managed so that way they are ready to learn. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely going to forsake everything that Skinner had to say. Maybe you'll value his ideas of repetition and drilling. Maybe you'll limit that just to a beginner level class. But as your students progress and become more advanced, perhaps you'll take on some more of these ideas. You can parse this out and figure out exactly which of these views you want to take, and let that influence what techniques and procedures you actually use in your classroom. And as we say, this is really where the rubber meets the road. That many of the day-to-day decisions that I will make as a teacher when I'm planning my lesson or when I'm interacting with students, many of those ideas might actually be related to this. It might be the actual techniques and procedures that I use to carry out my lesson. But it's good not to forget that many of those are influenced by our SLA theories. Teaching methods come into play because occasionally throughout the last century, people have taken some of these views of language and they have created their own collection of techniques and procedures based on what they think about language and language learning. Eventually, someone comes along and says, if this is how language is learned, then I recommend this collection of techniques and procedures to teach your students. And they package it, they put a name on it, and they spell out, this is how you should teach a student. For example, they may call it CLT, or communicative language teaching, where they believe that the teacher's role is to be a facilitator in the classroom, and to use lots of communicative activities, including information gaps and role plays. Or someone else might come along and have a slightly different view of how language should be learned, and they'll create their own different collection of techniques and procedures. For example, TPR, or total physical response, might borrow some of the same techniques and procedures from CLT, but they might add to them as well. So TPR adds the idea that there should be lots of reading and listening in their classroom, following by lots of acting out that language through lots of movement. But TPR not only adds some new ideas, but they also make some changes if you compare it back to communicative language teaching. So instead of viewing the teacher's role as a facilitator, in TPR they actually view the teacher's role as a director in a stage play, and they think of the students more like actors in that play. And as you look at the complete descriptions of these teaching methods, you'll see that that's really what they are. It's a view that somebody had of what language is and how it should be learned. And then it's a collection of different ideas, techniques, procedures, and really just guiding principles. And it's packaged up nice and neat with a name that hopefully you can remember and a set of ideas that you can follow. One of the big takeaways from this lesson is that you're going to be able to review some of these ideas that have gone before you, but then you're also going to be able to think about your own. If you could create your own teaching method, what would it be called? How would you represent your view of how language should be learned? And what techniques and procedures would you include in your teaching method? This is really where we're going with this lesson, is what is your method? But before we get there, we need to talk about a few more ideas and details about teaching methods.